Data shows that people who use their strengths daily are like 3 times more likely to report having an excellent quality of life. So it's good for the person and it's good for the organization. But here's what I know for sure. When you align your leadership with your natural strengths, everything changes. Your energy increases, your impact grows, and work becomes something you're excited about rather than something you have to push through. You deserve to experience the joy and fulfillment that comes from working in your zone of genius.
Welcome. You're listening to This Leader, the podcast. If you lead people and are seeking the transformational, high-impact secrets that will lead to greater joy and fulfillment in your work, will optimize your team performance, and will help you create a happy, highly productive workplace, then you are this leader and you're in the right place. I'm your host, Claire Laughlin, and each week my guests and I will explore the mindsets, techniques, and actionable strategies that will help you build the career, team, and organization of your dreams. Because I believe no one should have to suffer in a dysfunctional workplace. Let's get started.
Hi. As we get started today, I want you to imagine a time you were working on something and you were deeply in the zone, right? You got lost in the activity, time stood still, and you felt energized and awake, like you could do it all day long. Now think, what was the activity? What made it special? What was it that was so compelling? Now, consider the kinds of work activities that you would do with no pay. The kinds that are compelling even on a weekend. What calls to you? Why? Now, let me share just a little bit about me. For years, I would spend all week mired in minutia, like developing contracts, doing marketing work, responding to email, tending to urgent stuff. And all of that was absolutely important. But then on Saturdays, I'd head back to my office where I had this huge whiteboard. And I'd spend hours developing ideas and doing inspired strategic work, like I'd create new frameworks and solve complex organizational puzzles and map things out. I'd design solutions for leadership challenges that my clients were facing. And I enjoyed that work so much, I didn't really give myself permission to even really call it work or carve out time during the week for that activity. It was hard for me to quantify the impact of that time that I was spending. But honestly, it improved and refined and accelerated everything else I was doing. And I constantly left that for weekends because it felt like something extra. And somehow, I think I convinced myself that my manager wouldn't necessarily support it, but that wasn't true at all. Anyway, I'd look up, I'd realize I'd been at it for 4 hours, and I'd want to keep going. And only later did I realize that working in that place, in that special way where my natural abilities were really able to shine, that was where I could make the biggest impact. That was my unique contribution. And it's what I could bring to my role and to my team that others probably wouldn't. And what's more, I realized that it actually was okay to enjoy my work that much. And that, just because it was enjoyable for me, it didn't mean it wasn't valuable. What a funny thing to think, right? But I assumed that something like that came easily to me and everything, that I just thought it would be easy for anyone. And therefore, it wasn't special. And it wasn't until a few years later that I had learned that this particular ability was actually a natural talent of mine that others may not share. And that itself could set me apart and allow me to add a lot of value to any workplace I was in if I just knew what that was and how to describe it to others. And that realization changed everything. So today, I want to share with you what the research tells us about this phenomenon. And it's about working in your strengths. And more importantly, I want to share how you can harness your own strengths to increase your impact, to transform your leadership, to add lots of value, and to accelerate your team's performance. So, what exactly are you experiencing in those moments when you're completely in the zone? Well, this is you working in alignment with your strengths. So let's be clear about what we mean by strengths. I'm not talking just about skills you've learned or competencies you've developed. Of course, those things are important. But I'm talking about natural patterns, things you were born with, natural patterns of thinking and feeling and behaving that energize you and lead to peak performance. So here's how it's generally defined. A strength is the intersection between those natural talents of yours and the knowledge that you build and the skill that you develop all together. So it's the intersection of those three things: the talent, the knowledge, and the skill, and the experience, of course, that you all bring together. But the magic ingredient in that mix is really the natural talent that makes certain activities feel almost effortless while producing extraordinary results. Okay? So when you combine that natural talent and you add knowledge that you build and skill you develop to that, it's really that makes a strength. So the research on this is really compelling. I have so many books on my shelf right here behind me. And it's like Marcus Buckingham has done a lot of writing on it. And the late Don Clifton, he originated the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment originally. And the Gallup Organization and, lots of people have added to this along the way. But Marcus Buckingham, the late Don Clifton, and the Gallup Organization, they put strengths on the map, I think, really, when it comes specifically to applying strengths to work. So that's kind of outside the positive psychology realm. We'll talk about that in other episodes. But the data shows that people who use their strengths daily are like 3 times more likely to report having an excellent quality of life. So that's pretty good. They're 6 times more engaged at work, which, let's just be honest, it just feels good to be engaged. They're 8% more productive, and they're 15% less likely to quit their jobs. So it's good for the person, and it's good for the organization. But here's what really caught my attention. Teams that focus on strengths are much more productive, and they generate more profit. They have a 12.5% greater productivity rate, and they're 8.1% more profitable. So think about that for a minute. We're not talking about just some feel-good initiative here. If you need a business case, those are pretty compelling numbers. We're talking about creating measurable business impact by leaning into your strengths. It's well worth it. Okay, now you might be thinking, okay, Claire, strengths. This sounds great in theory, but how do I actually figure out what my strengths are? Well, there's several ways to approach this. You could take a formal assessment like the Strengths Finder or the Working Genius. I've mentioned both models on this podcast, and I've worked extensively with both, but they work a little differently. So let me tell you a little bit about each of them. The Strengths Finder, that's the one that was originally created by Don Clifton. It evaluates 34 different strengths, and it gives you your unique profile, and that will include at least your top 5 to 7 strengths and some great information on how to use your strengths and work with others who have different strengths. So that's all important. The one thing that people do say about it, and I've experienced this myself, is that it's really hard to remember all of your strengths. They have unique names. There's a lot of them. They're all different, So while it is a great profile, it's kind of complex that way. Now, the Working Genius is more focused primarily on 6 primary geniuses. They call it the Working Genius because there's these 6 different geniuses. And those geniuses are very directly applied to how we get work done. So with the Working Genius, it's super simple to remember your profile and to immediately apply what you've learned to your work. It's incredibly intuitive and almost magical in how quickly a team can put it to use, like in minutes. So I highly recommend taking an assessment. It's a great investment in you, okay? Working Genius is only about $25. I'm not sure what the Strengths Finder runs anymore, but the Working Genius is so easy to understand and apply. And again, it's only $25. Great investment in you. But you don't need an assessment to start your journey. You can begin with some self-reflection. So first, I want you to think about feedback you've received throughout your career. What do people consistently come to you for? What kind of work would you get handed to you over and over? What do people say you're naturally good at? I mean, often others can see our strengths more clearly than we can. And if people aren't telling you, maybe you can go and ask a few. Okay. Second, pay attention to what energizes you versus what drains you. Strengths aren't just things you're good at, they're things that give you energy when you do them. Third, notice patterns in your peak performance moments. Think about this. When have you achieved your best results? What are some of your greatest accomplishments? What were you doing during these times? How were you creating those peak performance moments? How were you thinking? How were you approaching the problem? Think particularly about those times, when you accomplished something great and you felt a sense of ease about the work. All right. For myself, I discovered that my strength zone includes things like, something called discerning, which is like detecting patterns and connecting dots between different kinds of information and designing solutions for complex, people-oriented problems that are particularly interesting to me and helping people understand themselves better. All of those things are things that are very naturally compelling to me. They always, always have been. And I've spent many, many years developing knowledge and abilities surrounding those things, solving complex communication problems. When I work in this space, I am super energized. And I'm not kidding when I say that. I mean, I literally can work a 50-hour week. And then while I'm driving home on a Friday in rush hour traffic, I can talk to a friend during my whole commute home about a struggle she's facing at work. And I will get home feeling more energized than when I left. So it really does give me energy. I mean, it's also good, though, to pay attention to what drains you. In the Working Genius, we call these our working frustrations. But for me, when I'm stuck doing a lot of routine administrative tasks, or things that are really detail oriented for too long, or when I have to buckle down and implement things and it's very, step by step process and very routine and detailed, I'm really drained. I have to moderate when I do these activities and how, right? I have to lean on tools and templates and other people to ensure that this kind of work gets done and gets done right. Now, if you've thought about your strengths, you might be thinking, okay, I know my strengths. Now what? The real power comes in 3 areas: leading yourself, leading others, and shaping your environment. First, leading yourself means structuring your work around your strengths as much as possible. And I know what some of you are thinking. Claire, I can't just ignore the parts of my job that don't align with my strengths. And I'll give you that. You're right. We all have to do things that don't bring us joy now and then, but you can be strategic about it. Look for ways to spend a little more time in your strength zone. Like, see if you can volunteer for projects that leverage your natural abilities. Sign up for those things, crowd out the other things with some good stuff. And when you work outside your strengths, which we all do, batch it together, right? Process it in batches and get through it efficiently. Lean on tools and templates and other people just like I do so you can return to what energizes you. Second, leading others means understanding and utilizing their unique strengths. One of the biggest mistakes I see leaders make is spending too much time trying to fix people's weaknesses instead of amplifying their strengths. I learned this lesson the hard way with my business manager, Marissa. Like, when she first started working with me, I asked her to do all kinds of start with a blank page kinds of invention work, because that's what I loved doing. And I figured everyone would love that. That's the fun stuff, right? But meanwhile, I kept all the detailed planning and systematic follow-through type of work for myself. And I was miserable. It turns out I had it completely backwards. That inventive work that I love, it wasn't the best fit for her. I mean, don't get me wrong. She is very creative and very inventive, but a blank page and a challenge outside her wheelhouse with no clarity, that feels very different for her than it does for me. And that systematic, detail-oriented work that drains me, well, she is magical at that. Her brain works differently than mine. She thrives getting and keeping things organized. And she's a wizard at remembering details and following through on projects. Simply amazing. So once we figured this out and we reorganized our responsibilities around our respective strengths. Thank goodness for the working genius, because that came along right when we started working together. Everything changed. Our productivity accelerated and our stress levels dropped, and we both found a lot more fulfillment in our work. So, third, shaping your environment. What does that mean? It means advocating for strengths-based approaches in your organization. Talk about it, bring it up. It could mean restructuring roles or making job adjustments to create more opportunities for people to work in their strengths. Or it might mean forming project teams based on complementary strengths. Like, side note, using the working genius makes this super easy to do. Or it could simply mean having more intentional conversations about how to leverage what people do best and enjoy the most. I mean, why not? We should love our work, right? Just because something comes easily for us doesn't mean it's not work. Now, I want to address something that I hear from leaders all the time. And here's what they say. Claire, this sounds great, but I work in an environment where people's roles can't just be adjusted. They have to do what their job description says, and they have to be well-rounded. We can't just let people work only in their strengths. And I get it. You're not wrong. If you're saying that to yourself, you're not wrong. There are certain baseline competencies that everyone needs, and there are some environments that obviously are a lot more flexible than others. But here's what the research shows. You will get far better results by helping people become excellent at what they're naturally good at than by trying to make them adequate at everything. Think of it this way. Would you rather have a team where everyone is like a 6 out of 10 at everything? Or a team where everyone is a 9 or a 10 in their strength areas, and you've just figured out how to cover the bases through collaboration? Okay, much better. Regarding flexibility, I have to admit, I always question the assumption that we can't adjust our roles. I'm sorry, that's just me. I really want to question that assumption, though, because I have found that there are often ways to be more flexible in real time. So this is me pushing back a little bit. If you don't think that there's any flexibility in your role, I think that you really should question it and think about if there's ways to hand off certain work to others or to partner with other people, because that could be a really great solution. And beyond that, I really believe there's ways we can bring our strengths to bear in any role we play. For example, I can bring that sense of my inventiveness to my task work that's harder for me. And I can do that sometimes. And think about ways to invent new ways to do my tasks more easily and things like that. It makes it easier to accomplish overall. And of course, no, it's not quite like doing projects that are truly aligned with my strengths, but it is a workaround, and some of that can work. Okay. So one really powerful way to address it, though, is to build what I call strengths partnerships, where people with complementary strengths work together to cover all the necessary ground. This isn't about people avoiding responsibilities either. It's about people taking responsibility for contributing their best to achieve shared goals. Now, let me share one more insight that I think will resonate with many of you. In my work with leaders, I consistently see people who are capable and competent, but somehow feel like they're pushing a boulder uphill every day. They're getting results, but it's exhausting, and they're wondering if this is just what leadership feels like. So here's what I've learned. When you're working primarily outside your strengths, or in your frustrations, as it's called in the working genius, everything takes more energy. Sure, you can still be successful, but you're operating at a much higher cost to yourself. And honestly, you're probably not achieving the full impact you're capable of. But when you align your work with your strengths, it's like switching from working against the current to working with it. You're still working hard, but you're working so much smarter. You're energized by the challenges instead of being depleted by them. This is particularly important for those of you in very visible leadership roles. Think about it. Your team is watching you. If you're energized and operating in your strengths, that energy is contagious, and it creates an environment of engagement. But if you're constantly drained and you're operating outside your sweet spot, that impacts your team energy and engagement too. So here's what I want you to do this week. First, Spend some time reflecting on your own strengths using the questions I mentioned earlier. Like, what energizes you? What do people consistently come to you for? And when have you achieved your best results? I put the questions all in the show notes if you need them, okay? Second, have strengths conversations with your team members. Ask them about times when they've been in the zone, find out what types of work energizes them versus drains them. You'll be amazed at what you discover, and take notes. Keep notes on these things. Third, look for one small way to reorganize responsibilities based on strengths. Maybe it's swapping certain tasks between team members, or maybe it's restructuring how you approach a particular project. And now, if you want to go deeper with this work, and I highly recommend that you do because you'll be able to add so much more value to your role, please go take the Working Genius assessment. It's just $25 and it takes 10 to 12 minutes, and it's really useful. I've been using it with my clients for the past few years, and I've been getting incredible results. Just go to workinggenius.com. Okay, workinggenius.com. I get no kickback from that. I'm just telling you. Workinggenius.com, $25, great assessment. And unlike other assessments that can feel kind of theoretical at times, the Working Genius gives you really immediately actionable insights. And it helps you identify what gives you energy and joy in your work. And even more importantly, it shows you how to apply your strengths to the process of work immediately. Also, I've created a guide for you, and it's called Bring Your Strengths to Work. And this is your guide for breaking down barriers and having a conversation with your manager so you can spend more time in your strengths at work. I want you to be able to talk about these things so that you can describe the value that you're adding and consistently look for ways to sculpt your work to align with your strengths. The guide includes worksheets and conversation starters, and it's literally a step-by-step roadmap for turning your awareness of your strengths into actual workplace changes. So I want you to go get this guide. You can find it at clairelaughlin.com/strengthsatwork. And the link, of course, is in the show notes. So don't forget the guide. Really important, because that's really going to help you translate what you learn about your strengths to your role. So as we wrap up, let me say this. Here's what I know for sure. When you align your leadership with your natural strengths, everything changes. Your energy increases, your impact grows, and work becomes something you're excited about rather than something you have to push through. Your team deserves a leader who's operating at their best, and you deserve to experience the joy and fulfillment that comes from working in your zone of genius. So that's it for today. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with another leader who might benefit. We can all benefit from working more in our strengths, right? And don't forget to download my guide, Bring Your Strengths to Work, okay? I promise it'll transform how you are able to put your strengths to work immediately and how to develop your team. It's at clairelaughlin.com/strengthsatwork. All one word, strengths at work. So thanks for listening. And until next week, go lead the way.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode. To learn more about my services and for lots of free resources and additional tools to enrich your journey, visit my website and subscribe to my newsletter at clairelaughlin.com. If you have a question about leadership, teams, or organizational culture you'd like me to address on the podcast, please reach out to me at support@clairelaughlin.com and connect with me on social channels at Claire Laughlin Consulting. Until next time, lead the way.